Step outside on a clear night, away from any city, and look up. What you see is approximately 5,000 stars with the naked eye. On an exceptionally clear night in a place with no light pollution at all, you can see the Milky Way, a dense, luminous band stretching across the entire sky, so rich with stars it looks like a smear of cloud. Ancient humans saw this every single night of their lives, not occasionally, every night. The sky was never washed out by streetlights. There were no cities. There was nothing between their eyes and the universe except darkness and clear air. For our entire existence as a species, for 290,000 out of 300,000 years, the night sky was the most spectacular thing any human being had ever seen. And every single night, it was right there. So what did they think it was? The answer is not one thing. It is many things as there were cultures, separated by oceans and mountains and tens of thousands of years. But when you look across all of them, something extraordinary emerges. Not agreement, these cultures had no contact with each other, but pattern, the same answers independently arrived at by people who shared nothing except the same sky and the same human brain. Today, we are going to explore what ancient humans thought the stars were, and somewhere inside the answer, inside the campfires and the souls of the dead and the hunters frozen in the sky, is one of the most beautiful things the human mind has ever produced. Before we talk about what ancient humans thought stars were, we need to spend a moment with the sky they were actually seeing, because it was not the sky most of us know. For almost all of human existence, there was no light pollution, none. No electric lights, no gas lamps, no city glow reflecting off clouds. When the sun went down, the world went genuinely dark, and the sky became something that modern urban humans have essentially never experienced. In that pre-light pollution sky, the Milky Way was not a faint smudge. It was a dominant feature of the night, a river of light so bright that it cast shadows on the ground on moonless nights. Individual stars were not distant pinpricks, but vivid, intense presences. The Pleiades, the Seven Sisters, a tight cluster of stars in the constellation Taurus, blazed so clearly that cultures on every continent independently named and tracked them without any connection to each other. The planets moved visibly, night by night, tracing paths through the fixed stars. Shooting stars streaked across the sky regularly enough to be familiar. Comets appeared without warning, transforming the sky for weeks at a time. This was the environment in which ancient humans developed their beliefs about stars. Not a dim, uncertain background feature, but the most dramatic, reliable, and overwhelming visual experience available to them. After the fire burned down and the group fell silent, the sky was simply there, every night, demanding to be understood. And here is the critical thing about the ancient human brain encountering the night sky. As we explored in our video on ancient religion, the human brain is a hyperactive agency detector. It is built to find intentions behind events, to see patterns as meaningful, to ask not just what is happening, but why, and who is doing it. Applied to the thunderstorm, this produced storm gods. Applied to the harvest, it produced fertility deities. Applied to the night sky, full of moving lights, following predictable paths, appearing and disappearing with the seasons, hanging over every human life like a permanent presence. It produced something that no human culture has ever been able to look at the stars and call random. They were not random. They were something. The question was what? Across the widest survey of ancient cultures ever assembled, one belief about the stars appears more consistently than any other. On every continent, in every era, among cultures with absolutely no contact with each other, the stars were the dead. Not a metaphor for the dead, not a symbol representing them, the actual souls, spirits, or presences of people who had died, continuing to exist in the sky in a form visible to the living below. The ancient Egyptians believed that the stars were the souls of the deceased, and that the pharaoh's soul joined the circumpolar stars after death, the stars that never set, that circle the pole star in an eternal cycle, never touching the horizon. These were called the indestructibles, and to become one of them was to achieve immortality. Their alignment of the pyramids with specific stars was not decorative. It was infrastructure, a physical mechanism designed to guide the dead king's soul to its destination in the sky. The indigenous peoples of Australia, whose astronomical traditions are the oldest continuous star knowledge on Earth, stretching back at least 65,000 years, held that the Milky Way was a river in the sky world where the dead traveled. Specific stars were specific ancestors. When you looked up and saw a bright star in the right position, you were not seeing a distant burning ball of gas. You were seeing your grandfather. Native American traditions across the continent described the Milky Way as the path of souls, the road that the dead walked after leaving the living world. The Iroquois called it the Road of Souls and described the dead traveling along it toward a country of ancestors in the west. Several Plains tribes believed that the souls of those who died in battle became stars, visible to the living as permanent reminders that the dead were still present. The Maori of New Zealand described the Aurora Australis, the southern lights, as the campfires of ancestors who had sailed south and settled in a distant land of ice. When the sky lit up in shifting curtains of color, it was not a geomagnetic phenomenon. It was a signal from the dead that they were still there, still warm, still gathered around their fires. And the Sami people of northern Scandinavia, whose traditional star knowledge predates any written astronomical record in Europe, described the northern lights as the spirits of the murdered dead, still restless, still moving. Their elders warned children not to whistle at the aurora because the spirits might be angered and come down. These cultures are separated by oceans, by thousands of years, by every conceivable cultural barrier. They arrived at the same fundamental answer independently. The sky is where the dead go. The stars are proof that death is not the end. This is not coincidence. This is a pattern that reveals something about the human mind itself. When you look up at an unchanging, ever-present, unreachable light in the sky, and you have recently lost someone you love, something in the human brain reaches toward the obvious interpretation. They are still there. They are up there. I can see them. The dead as stars belief was not universal. The second most common ancient answer to the question of what stars were is in some ways even more touching. They were campfires. Distant people, gathered around their own fires, visible across the vast darkness, the same way you could see a neighboring group's fire from a hillside on a clear night. The sky, in this understanding, was not empty space, but a version of the landscape, populated, inhabited, with other beings living their lives at an incomprehensible distance. This belief appears consistently in hunter-gatherer traditions across Africa and the Americas. It makes immediate, intuitive sense from the perspective of someone whose nightly experience is organized entirely around fire. Fire is warmth, safety, food, community. The most important thing in your world at night is the fire your group sits around. When you look up and see the sky full of small lights flickering slightly in the atmospheric shimmer, appearing warm and orange near the horizon, forming clusters that look like gatherings, the conclusion that these are other fires, other people, other groups living their lives in the sky above you is not primitive. It is an elegant application of the only explanatory framework available. The Australian Aboriginal Yolngu people describe certain star clusters as the campfires of sky beings gathering for ceremony. The Tasmanians describe the Gemini twins, Castor and Pollux, as two ancestor beings who created fire and now live in the sky, their campfire visible to the people below. The connection between fire and stars runs so deep across so many traditions that some researchers have suggested it may reflect the original human interpretation of the night sky, the first answer the species ever gave to the question of what those lights were. Think about what the night sky would look like to someone who had never been told what stars were. You are sitting by your fire in the darkness. Around you, at eye level, is warmth and light and community. You look up. Above you, in every direction, are thousands of small lights, some bright and steady, some faint and wavering, clustering in groups and stretching in long rivers across the black. They are not moving fast enough to be birds. They are not low enough to be fires on a nearby hill. They are very far away, and they look exactly like what you know small lights in darkness to be. Of course they were campfires. What else would they be? There is something profound in this answer that gets lost when we dismiss it as primitive. The campfire interpretation of stars is not a failure of understanding. It is an act of imaginative generosity toward the universe, a refusal to believe that those lights in the sky were nothing, that the darkness between you and the horizon was uninhabited, that the vast sky above you was empty. The campfire answer says, The world is full of people, even out there, beyond what we can reach, there are others, gathered around their fires, living like us. That impulse to see the universe as inhabited, as populated, as not alone, is not something science has replaced. It has deepened it. We now know there are at least 2 trillion galaxies in the observable universe, and that the conditions for life appear not to be extraordinarily rare. Ancient humans looked at a handful of lights and imagined other campfires. We now have reason to believe they may have been more right than they knew. But ancient humans didn't just look at individual stars. They looked at patterns, and what they saw in those patterns revealed something about what occupied the center of their mental lives. They saw animals across cultures with no contact with each other. The constellation we now call Orion, 3 bright stars in a row forming a belt with a bright star at each shoulder and knee, was independently identified as a hunter, not by all cultures, but by cultures across Africa, Europe, Asia, and the Americas. Greek mythology gave him a name and a story. Aboriginal Australians saw the same figure as a hunter pursuing the star animals of the Pleiades. Northern Asian cultures saw a hunter of reindeer. North American cultures saw a hunter of bears. The Pleiades themselves, that tight cluster of 7 bright stars, were tracked by ancient cultures on every inhabited continent. The Babylonians used their appearance to mark the agricultural calendar. Aboriginal Australians described them as the 7 sisters, pursued across the sky by a male figure. The ancient Japanese called them Subaru. The ancient Greeks wove an elaborate myth around them. The ancient Maori navigated the Pacific by them. Why the Pleiades everywhere? Partly because they are simply one of the most visually distinctive features of the naked eye sky, a compact, bright cluster that stands out clearly from the surrounding stars. But partly, researchers now believe, because of something much more extraordinary. A 2018 paper published in the journal Athens Journal of History proposed something that initially seemed almost too remarkable to accept: that cave paintings across Europe, dating back 40,000 years, encode specific star positions, and that ancient hunter-gatherers were tracking the precession of the equinoxes. Precession is the slow wobble of the Earth's axis that causes the positions of stars to shift over thousands of years. It was conventionally believed to have been discovered by the ancient Greek astronomer Hipparchus around 127 BCE, but the research suggests knowledge of this phenomenon goes back at least 40,000 years further. The famous Lion Man of Hohenstein-Stadel, a 40,000-year-old ivory carving of a figure with a human body and a lion's head, appears to encode a specific date using the star positions of the surrounding constellations. The animal paintings in the Chauvet cave at 36,000 years old may do the same. Ancient hunter-gatherers were not just looking at the stars, they were tracking them with a precision that we have only recently been able to measure. They were, in other words, doing astronomy tens of thousands of years before the word existed. Of all the features of the ancient night sky, none generated more consistent and more elaborate belief systems than the Milky Way. In a pre-light pollution sky, the Milky Way is not subtle. It is a massive structural feature. A band of dense, luminous cloud stretching from horizon to horizon, clearly different in character from the individual stars scattered around it. It is brightest toward the center of our galaxy, where the stellar density creates an almost glowing core. It has a texture, a depth, a sense of vastness that no individual star can communicate, and across ancient cultures it was almost universally understood as a road, the road of the dead, the path of souls, the route along which the living could not travel but the dead walked after leaving the physical world. The Iroquois and Huron described it explicitly as the path of souls, with the souls of the deceased and their dogs forming the 2 streams visible in the Milky Way, the main band and the smaller parallel streak that appears in particularly dark skies. Multiple Native American traditions place the afterlife at the end of the Milky Way, somewhere in the west, and describe the dead as travelers along it. The ancient Egyptians connected the Milky Way to the celestial Nile, the river of the sky that mirrored the river of the earth, along which the dead sailed in their solar boats on the nightly journey through the underworld. In their cosmology, the sky was not just above the earth, but was a parallel version of it, a realm where the same features existed in a grander, more permanent form. The ancient Greeks called it Galaxias Kyklos, the Milky Circle, and invented a myth of Heracles spilling his divine milk across the sky. But beneath the mythology was the same intuition. This was not empty space, it was a place, a destination, something that a soul might travel toward. The Maya described the Milky Way as the world tree, the great axis that connected the underworld, the earth, and the heavens. At the center of existence was this luminous spine, and all of cosmic reality was organized around it. Their temples were oriented to track its position at key moments of the year. Their calendar was partly structured around its movements. The Milky Way was not a background feature, it was the fundamental structure of reality. So, what did ancient humans think stars were? They thought they were the dead, still present, still visible, gathered in the sky in forms that the living could see and take comfort from. They thought they were campfires of distant beings, living their lives in the sky the way living people lived theirs below. They thought they were animals and hunters, frozen in permanent chase across the heavens. They thought the Milky Way was a road, a river, a spine of the universe along which the dead traveled and the sacred moved. None of these answers is scientifically correct. The stars are not the souls of the dead. The Milky Way is not a road for souls. The Pleiades are not seven sisters fleeing a hunter. They are distant suns, thousands of light years away, burning through nuclear fusion, utterly indifferent to the small planet circling one of their neighbors. But here is the thing about those ancient answers that science cannot diminish. They were produced by human minds confronting the most overwhelming visual experience available to them, the unpolluted night sky, with nothing but their own intelligence, their own emotions, and their own desperate need to make meaning out of what they saw. And they produced answers that were beautiful, that made the universe feel inhabited rather than empty. That turned the most isolating sight in nature, a sky full of lights too far away to reach, into a source of connection, proof that the dead was still present, proof that the world extended beyond what living eyes could see. Astronomers now know that the universe is approximately 93 billion light years across, that there are more stars in the observable universe than there are grains of sand on every beach on Earth, that the light reaching your eyes from some of those stars left its source before the Earth existed. Ancient humans looked at the same sky and saw their grandparents. I am not sure the scientists have the better view.